Hello and welcome to the program. Financial reforms are the cornerstone of a stable economy. What is the current financial situation in Ukraine and what are the challenges ahead? Joining us today to talk about this topic is Oksana Markarova, Acting Finance Minister of Ukraine. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting.
So first, for the viewers to understand, can you tell us more about the priority of the work of the Ministry of Finance today?
Yes, I'm not really a new person to the ministry, as I came together with Natalie Yaresko and served as the first deputy minister for all this time until I was appointed an acting minister. For me, it's quite clear that I have to focus on three priorities. The number one is to ensure the transparent and efficient budgeting process. So it means that I would like to introduce fully the midterm budgeting, very important reform. Not only for financial sphere, but for in general for the economic development of Ukraine. Also to institute spending reviews, something that we will be doing on a pilot project this year and hopefully to be our Bible going forward with the spending reviews, and ensuring the macroeconomic stability through agreement with the IMF and all other international partners to ensure that the economic stability that we have reached during the previous years is actually here. Then on the basis of this macroeconomic stability, the next priority is how can we support the economic growth. And that's all type of priorities or sub-priorities from the administration, tax administration reform, to supporting through various budgetary instruments the economic growth in the sectors where we see that we have to support and increase the output, but also, most importantly, getting as many foreign investors into the country as possible, both into private sector, but also participate in privatization, which is a key priority as well.
And would you say that the Ukrainian market today is strong enough to welcome foreign investors, to welcome some kind of speculation on this market?
We are definitely one of the most interested and promising markets, especially not only for investors in our papers, but also for private equity investors. We are the largest still undeveloped European market. During the past 3 years, we have signed a lot of free trade agreements, which makes our products and services very competitive. So the companies that actually come, and we already see the trend coming, a lot of French, German companies are coming here not just to open the production here for Ukraine, but actually open the production here for Ukraine and export from Ukraine. So we will continue that trend, and we will focus together with our partners in the Ministry of Economy on not only the investment promotion, but also on export support.
Now, recently Bloomberg published a report about the fact that the hryvnia, not necessarily being the strongest currency in Eastern Europe, but is still the most stable, actually. Are there any safeguards if the market opens about the hryvnia in this currency? Are there any safeguards to ensure that this money doesn't go into some financial bubble?
First of all, you saw the announcement that the IMF full mission will be here in September. And we work very actively both on the government side, but also together with the IMF to reach agreement before the end of the mission and actually move ahead with our cooperation with IMF. The second is, of course, is to ensure that the budget is actually executed, and executed with the fiscal deficit of 2.5% as planned in the budget. We actually are very devoted, it's one of our priorities, the fiscal consolidation, meaning that we are decreasing our fiscal deficit. And actually, I think investors still remember the times when the public finance deficit was 10% of the GDP. So it's really remarkable that we were able to decrease it from 10% of the GDP, the general deficit, to 2.5%. And we actually plan to continue decreasing it. So the 2019 budget, which we're in the final days of the preparation at the Ministry of Finance, will have the 2.2% deficit, and the next one for the 2020 will be even lower.
Now, you talked about the date of 2020, and that's an interesting date, because some experts say that concerning the IMF, if Ukraine doesn't receive that tranche, that loan from the IMF, Ukraine might live on its reserve? Is it sustainable? Is it a plausible situation? And if it happens, how to deal with it?
As the Minister of Finance, I do not plan to live on the reserves. I plan to reach agreement with IMF. I'm also interested not only to discuss, as I said, with IMF the current items that we have on the agenda for this review, but also to discuss the potential continuation of the program beyond the date of March 2019, so that we will give, together with this 3-year budgeting and a longer period of cooperation with IMF, we will actually provide both Ukrainian business but also foreign investors with not only safeguards, but a vision of where Ukraine will be developing in the next years.
Now, for this loan, we talked about the requirements. What are the requirements asked by the IMF for this one?
Well, it's known that there were 3 remaining items on the agenda, which is the anti-corruption court, which we already met. It's also the gas sector reform and the automated review of the prices, and to ensure that the 2018 budget is actually within the 2.5% deficit. So we are discussing both of the other 2 items right now with the mission by email and phones, and we will finalize it when the mission is here, but I'm pretty confident that we will do everything possible to find solutions in both. On the budget, just want to know that it's not just because IMF raised the concerns, it's equally important for us, and we also stay devoted to stay within 2.5% deficit, so it will be done no matter what. Now
you raised the issue of the gas prices. How to ensure that Ukraine can meet the requirements of the IMF without having, let's say, ordinary Ukrainian having huge bills to pay, huge bill of gas to pay?
The ordinary Ukrainians were not affected by the previous increase, and I have to remind that 2 years ago when the Prime Minister Groisman came into the position of Prime Minister, he had to go to 70% of the import parity price in one go, but he actually went to 100% in one go. But because we have a very efficient subsidy system, we actually covered all the people who really need assistance. So the ordinary Ukrainian, as you say, they are not the ones who were hit last time, and they are not going to be hit with any increases of the prices going forward.
But the bills did skyrocketed last winter.
Well, no, because the people paid, they skyrocketed for those who had either very large apartments or large houses, or they have the income that is sufficient to pay the economically and market price for gas. But it's the same in Europe, it's the same in the United States, it's the same in pretty much every country, even in our neighbors who are former Soviet Union countries. If if people call their colleagues or relatives there, it's pretty easy to check that, every country that is not self-sufficient on the gas exploration, and this is actually, that's what we have to focus on. We are, one of the key priorities for the government in general is to increase the gas exploration and explore so that we can actually not only use our Ukrainian gas ourselves, but also maybe become the net contributor of gas to the other markets. That will be a game changer. Right now, while we are still purchasing the gas from the outside, there is a market price for gas.
So being more than self-sufficient, being able to be, as you said, an active player. Now about modernization, can you expand on the modernization of the whole financing system, financing services that happened recently in Ukraine?
Well, there is a lot of, I think, if you go back to 1991, when Ukraine became independent, and in banking sector, for example, then, there was a situation when we were so behind European markets, because in the Soviet Union there were only 2 banks essentially, the savings bank and the construction bank, that we had two chances to move forward, either to catch up with everything that we missed and develop slowly the banking system, or take the best what was on the market at that time and actually leapfrog, right? So we never had paper checks, for example, in this country for the population in general. We built one of the most efficient electronic payment systems right away. We are in a bit similar situation after the revolution now. So in a lot of areas, we're trying to leapfrog. And the ProZorro system that we have, the procurement system, the e-data portal that we created here at the Ministry of Finance, and we put all the treasury data online. Now the changes that we're trying to make in the SFS on the payment systems and deregulating, in essence, a lot of areas. Similar that in banking, for example, the system that Privat Bank has now and other banks, they are more convenient and more widely available than in a lot of European countries. So I think this should be, the innovation should be at the core of every reform that we're doing now, because it will not only allow us to do something more efficiently, a little bit more faster, but it will allow us to do it differently with more value add. And then it will be something that will put us back on the map with the investors and will make us competitive and will attract more people to come and work and live here.
So how does this kind of tool, modern tool, let's say Privat Bank and electronic system, help with the corruption? How does it make the system less opaque?
I think, again, when we talk about corruption, a lot of people think about law enforcement fight with the corruption. Of course, it's very important, and we are doing everything at the government to fund the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, the Anti-Corruption Prosecutor. Now we are already involved in the funding of the new Anti-Corruption Court, which will be created. But that is not our core function. It's a law enforcement agency. Where I think we are instrumental is actually in preventing corruption and eliminating space for corruption. And that's where the transparency, but also this new electronic systems play a very crucial role, because that's how it's more efficient to fight with the corruption. You just, light the shine light in the dark corners, right? So again, putting up the e-data portal and making public all the information of all the expenditures of every spending unit in the country. You can go online now on the spending.gov.ua and check where your municipality or where the Ministry of Finance is spending money on what, who are we paying, at what price we are buying our paper, even, to the littlest details. So it's, I think we have to do it more. The Ministry of Justice has opened a lot of registries that also allowed a lot of transparency. So these new technologies, in essence, and innovations not only increase the efficiency, which is important for us, but also prevent corruption.
Now, we talked about the reforms, and how do you ensure that the reforms that are being implemented now will stay in the future? How do you
that is the very important question. It's probably the most important question, how to make these changes irreversible and how to make sure that they stay. Well, I think first it's essential to involve the public sector and civil society into it. And when you give these instruments like e-data or ProZorro and others, it will be very difficult, if not impossible, for somebody to reverse it because the public demands it and business supports it. Second, I think it's very important to institutionalize it. That's why it's very important that a lot of reforms, they start as reform plans. We have this reform support teams that are designing the ideas, but it's very important to then make it part of our processes. That's why on the midterm budgeting, we did it in the pilot project, but it's essential now to adopt a new budget code, which will be the new budget Bible, and that's how it's going to be done, even when, there is a new Minister of Finance, or the Minister of Finance after the new Minister of Finance. So I think it's essential to, design reform, test it, implement it, but then institutionalize it so it's a part of the processes.
Well, thank you for this overview on the current situation in Ukraine. It was a pleasure to interview you. That was Oksana Markarova, Acting Finance Minister of Ukraine. Thank you for watching the program. Stay tuned for the rest.